What's going on, creators? Yeah, just want to get on here and bring everybody back to now. Appreciate y'all being here and vibing with me for a bit. Yeah, today I like to continue the conversation on mental diets. Hopefully, adding something positive to your mental diet for today. Today I got a couple things wrote out to talk about. Most importantly, for today, is like demonstrating faith and what that kind of means and how we can go about doing these types of things, because we're already doing these things. It's like, a lot of times you'll hear someone say, oh, a demonstration of faith, and then like maybe there's like guilt or shame that comes in of like, oh, well, that person's on some sort of like spiritual pedestal. They're like way up there and they're like doing something awesome. And we're all demonstrating faith, because the inner conversations, our inner beliefs, assumptions about reality, our identity on a big level, is already being mirrored in our life. And so, take a big, like, kind of step back, look at everything that you've been given to steward, your family, your spouse, relationship. Everything is in relationship. Um, and some of those relationships are toxic, while some are going as a positive example for others, maybe. But like one of the things I got like wrote down to talk about is whenever you're looking at your identity and what you have to steward, if there's anything that's glaringly obvious that's like, okay, well, this is going on, but this is obviously not where I want to be or what I want to be doing, or that I don't want this to be part of my identity at all anymore. That realization is the first step in moving your attention to the direction you want to go. And so part of like taking that inventory of where you're at is radically, for one, accepting your current state of consciousness. Also taking responsibility and ownership for it. And until you do those two first steps, you're always going to just be a victim of quote unquote circumstance that you're ultimately creating yourself with your patterns of resistance. Because even though it might be hard to hear, we push away the good life, the life that we actually desire. We push it away, mostly unconsciously through our fear, because it feels like if we were to move, like, for example, from scarcity to abundance, that feels almost like a death to like the old identity that has like been so I don't know, you grab all of these like attributes of scarcity and whatnot, and you make that part of who you believe yourself to be. And so anything contrary to that then all of a sudden feels like almost like a death. And so much of like moving from different states of consciousness, is, as you do it more and more so, the easier it becomes and the less of an ordeal that is. Some of these patterns, maybe have been going on since childhood, so it might be a little bit more of a process to unwind all of these errors and thinking, identifying yourself as connected with fear, guilt, shame, ultimately kind of, aligning yourself to like Satan, basically, if you're going to go biblically, and getting out of those lies of separation and get into the new creation that you are in Christ. That's really important, to move from that old state to that new identity. Who you actually are in Christ. The born again you, and looking at like that past identity as being gone. Crucified with Christ, as the Bible would say, and if that means giving yourself like a new kind of like identity name, maybe that's helpful. It's like looking at like the old you as like, oh no, that was something that Mike used to do, but I'm new now, and so I'm not gonna believe lies of scarcity anymore. A lot of like the moving from what you desire, or moving from what you don't desire, which is basically like fundamental of the old identity, which is everything being separate, everything is disconnected, everything is through force, and like and it's always reacting. It's always being reactive from a past point of view that was in error, and it's constantly recreating that error in the present moment over and over again, doubling down on it, and redoing it over and over again, and so instead of staying in that insanity loop, look at, go within your own mind, into your own being, your own consciousness, and take that kind of inventory of where you're at. Focus on what's going good, not just what's the obvious weeds or the obvious, things that are disturbing your peace and all that kind of shit. But, when you start focusing on what's going right, what's going right, what's going good, what feels good, you're going to find that a lot more is going right with you than what your mind might be kind of like tempting you to think. So it's like as simple as, just take an inventory from the top of your head to the bottom of your feet. It's like, oh, not balding, that's a good thing. It's like I can see, that's a good thing. I can smell, I can, all my senses are available, that's a good thing. I'm able to like move my neck and shit without like a bunch of like sharp shooting pain. And you just start working like down. By the time you get to your toes, like in a lot of ways, you start to elevate your consciousness, and that's just one area that God's given you to steward. And not to say that you are, connecting with like the form, but not to sit there and talk shit about it either. Jesus described like our body as like a temple, and like God's within us, and so I think it's really important. And I think it's like an error that I hear quite a bit in like the spiritual community, where it's just like, oh, you're just going to take this body off like old dirty rags and just throw it in the dumpster, and, everything's going to be better tomorrow when this magical you made it moment happens and you finally just stop breathing, and then you get to go to heaven. And it's like totally like throwing out the relative world as being any type of value, even though God created the relative world for a reason. Who knows what that reason is entirety. It's just, we don't know these things, but like, part of like moving from, any type of like, state of consciousness is that first you gotta just like recognize where you're at. And if there's a glaring thing, well, at that point, then start putting on that new identity, because it's all about identity. And all of these scraps of fear and all of these types of things from like the old consciousness just need ultimately either forgiven or let go of. And even like what does forgiveness mean? And it's like, our old identity had like I'm gonna be on a pedestal because I'm superior to you and you like wronged me, so I'm going to take pity on you, and and that's concept of forgiveness. When a lot of times, you look to like God as like, well, how did God forgive? And it's like by not seeing anything that needed to be forgiven in the first place. Like all of it has just been just an elaborate illusion, and so like a lot of that is like relearning a lot of like vocabulary and language for your own inner understanding, and learning that through like the Holy Spirit, which is within you. And so yeah, it's like an important thing to keep in mind, but it's also important that, God has blessed you, and so it's like the old identity of feeling cursed and made, it's like needs to suffer, 24/7, and always spending the present moment suffering for whatever reason. Look at that as like part of your old nature, your old identity, and in the new, that doesn't have to be what your experience is. God is love, and love doesn't have torment, and you are connected with love. It's within you, and so you're going to demonstrate those attributes, where in the past you were demonstrating the attributes of fear. And part of that is scarcity, and that not enoughness. There's not enough money, there's not enough friends, there's not enough time, there's not enough views, there's not enough subscribers, there's not enough not enoughness, and all of that is a story that you're telling yourself that has no bearing on reality, on truth, really. But as you catch it, though, that you're telling yourself these things, that you're telling yourself these lies, it's important that then you drop that, realize that that's part of your old identity, and embrace this new identity where that's not who you are. And as you make that inner change, that inner identity shift, self concept is another way to describe that. Then like the mirror of reality will start to reflect that change back to you. And so it becomes more and more apparent that it's like, okay, let's have a better reflection in the mirror. If all we got to do is change what our inner conversation is going on, and then God will manifest it physically through demonstration, and then you can kind of demonstrate that faith. Regardless, we're all just demonstrating our faith anyway. Some people have faith in nothing, and that's what they're demonstrating. It's still a demonstration. Some people are demonstrating scarcity. Some people are demonstrating fear and suffering and torment and all sorts of states of consciousness in between. It's like every state exists, good and bad. I mean, it's like it's all relative, and so you've been given the free will to choose what states to occupy, though. And so it's like the easiest way to start changing states, though, is to realize that every state that you don't want, that you have been like suffering through, is part of your old state, your old identity, your old basically your old state of consciousness, where it was founded on like the foundation being, oh, I'm separate from God, and I'm separate from my neighbors. When you're not, it's all connected, and so it becomes more and more apparent that when you drift into the consciousness of like the old identity, that you become aware of it, and you do become aware of it automatically because you start to suffer, as you kind of like turn away from love, and you drift back into the old nature, and you start listening to the wrong guide. There's torment attached to it, and so it's as quick as like realizing that, oh, I'm suffering again for some reason. Maybe it's a good time to breathe, get present, and ask God what to do next, because that's the biggest shift is like the old mind thinking it was alone and it had to come up with the game plan and basically be on the same level as God, where it's like, oh, I'm going to sit on the throne and I'm going to make the game plan and everything's going to, whatever, but like in doing that, then you just create all this separateness, which then gets reflected back to you, which makes, more and more alone, more and more, drama, more and more fear, more and more just ultimately the undesirable, starting to manifest. But as you realize that you're connected with God, and that's part of your identity now, you'll start to see that being reflected, and as it unfolds in the present moment throughout the day, and throughout, and just like the more that you're able to kind of hold mental stillness, and like it's like a battle to stay at rest is a way to think of it, and the more you can kind of just stay at rest, when you get like maybe a thought that comes in, you don't have to sit there and judge the thought, because ultimately infinite intelligence is the one that's leading, pulling the strings on these thoughts, and how this flow is happening. The more that you hand over these types of things to like infinite intelligence to figure out, then you realize, oh, it's already been figured out. I don't got to sit here and effort and struggle and strive and freak out and be afraid and, oh, what if this happens? Oh, if I could only have a little bit more, then I could be happy. But it's more of a process of just being more and more happy now. Being more and more content, more and more able to steward these different things without becoming in your mind about it. A lot of times, like the old mindset just wants more and more and more. But then when it gets more and more and more, then there's just more fear of loss, which then it's fucking weird. Because like even in scarcity mindset, where it's just like, oh, if I where it's just like not having enough money is one form of scarcity. Even when you do get money, then all of a sudden then the scarcity mindset is like, oh, well, I'm going to lose it. You got thousands and whatever dollars in the bank. When you had, fucking 2 pennies to scratch together, you go from scarcity like that to now you got thousands of dollars in the bank, and then it's like, oh, what if the bank freezes this account? What if what if there's fear of loss, and then you're still just in your head with anxiety, this free floating anxiety throughout the day, when you can kind of get out of that mindset by realizing that you are one with God's abundance, and all the money in the world is God's. And it's just a matter of stewarding what you have, because part of why you aren't more abundant is because you're pushing it away, because you maybe feel like it's evil, or it's going to change you, or it's going to make you less moral, or whatever story you're telling yourself about it. It's just just monopoly money, it's just made up, Babylonian bills. Whatever it happens to be, why you're pushing it away. You're ultimately, not giving God the credit of, like, it's God's money. God's the provider. It's, God created it. Everything in creation is God has a function and has a spiritual reason for it. And that's one of the things you start to pick up on as you kind of go on this path. It's like you start to realize everything is part of the one consciousness, and there is not all these separatenesses going on. It's only God's will being unfolded. And if things are the way they are in your life, you need to take inventory of your thoughts and your inner beliefs and your assumptions, and the ones that are limiting you, or the things that are causing resistance, that are like, it's like, I think scarcity is such a good example, just from my own life, because I was saturated with those kind of beliefs. And so it was like, and then having to with like a handyman business and the music business, then all of a sudden you're kind of in a different situation than just getting a paycheck, because now it's like, well, I can just work more, I can kind of create my own kind of flows of money. So it's like, at what point does it become a like a stumbling block or some shit, and you start to realize, well, is it $1,000 a day? Is it $500 a day? Is it $200 a day? At what point is it okay versus, now it's become obsessive or whatever, and like, so much of it has to do with not feeling worthy, because that's part of the old identity, feeling scarcity, and not making the connection that it's like the cash and everything is provided by God. You don't got to sit there and keep begging for it, then having all this fear of loss when you do get it. That it's just perfectly being unfolded to you as soon as you stop pushing it away. It's like it'll open up more and more opportunities. And the more that you like drop like the limiting beliefs of, it can only come through my employer, let that shit go. It's just like, the more that your faith is open to possibilities that are just, just because nothing's impossible for God. So, putting any type of limitation on it is as a limiting belief. And that's, a lot of what the old identity was just doing, just creating limitations, creating limiting beliefs, and these feeling, constricted, and there's opportunities for other people but not for me, this kind of stories that you tell yourself and all that kind of shit that's not real. It's getting more and more into feeling unlimited. It's like, what does that feel like? Does that matter to you? I mean, it's like, or would you rather feel limited? It's part of like the old mind is feeling separate and limited and scarce and alone and fearful and shameful and full of guilt, because it feels like it somehow broke God's will somehow, unconsciously in most of it, and then just naturally as part of like an identity is constantly just effortlessly and easily just breaking God's will. When when you really look at it, I mean, it's like the arrogance of that kind of like mindset. Like, you can like easily and effortlessly, it's like, just look at all the functioning of your body, for example. The trillions of cells that are just harmoniously functioning in this co-op that is bringing us to this point together right now. That these cells in our eyes can somehow like translate vibration through a like a stem that just like kind of merges with your brain somehow. and then you can see, but it's upside down, and then it's flipped. It's just, it's just, the amount of complexity of life is just incredible when you really become more and more aware of it. And as you do become more and more aware of it, then, it just, and then as you see like synchronicities and the way that all these things just come together when you drop it and let go of like obsessing about it mentally, and then you just let it go, and you just like you just kind of just be, and then it just unfolds like perfectly in a way you couldn't have imagined anyway. And that's like one of like the biggest like I don't want to say criticisms, but like Neville Goddard, because I've been like a checking his work out, putting it to the test, and there's a lot of like solid information on there, and like a lot of like in that kind of law of assumption crowd, there's a lot of like talk about like imagining like the desired state. But just through personal experience, when these things manifest, it's always in a way that's unexpected and unimagined. It's like how it plays out. It's like, yeah, like say you wanted to get like a here, like here's my wallet, like like a wallet full with like cash and shit, and so and it's like, oh well, I'm going to imagine all of these like different scenarios where that happens, and then when you just like drop the importance of like the how, and then it's like, oh well, this came from like a Christmas present that was lost, and this was like from like some rent that I didn't know I was going to get, and this is going to be from this, and this comes from a job, and it just comes all these different unexpected ways. Oh, somebody just made a donation. Oh, they wanted to support like the channel. Oh, somebody licensed some music. Oh, it's like all of these different ways. It's just like trying to sit there and imagine everything. I feel like is a limiting belief on what God and God's infinite intelligence can bring things so easily and effortlessly, because it's not hard. God already owns it. It's already part of like, it already belongs to God. And so it's like having this idea that it's some efforting, some struggle, like, oh, somebody's going to have, it's based on this idea that, it's a scarcity belief of like, oh, to give somebody money means I have to lose it. Or if I am going to receive money, that means that somebody loses it. And then it's like, well, I don't want somebody to lose it, so then you push it away, and then you create more resistance, but as soon as you let that shit go, and it's like, well, why would I, this is like, if someone, if you're in the flow of it and you give it out, then it multiplies and comes back. It's because you're only ever giving it to yourself. It's kind of different to think about, but like trying to create all of these like rules and just like in ways and shit, I feel like is a stumbling block, trying to just constantly be in your mind imagining, because it's also saying in the present moment that that's not who you are. Desiring to be is saying in that moment that you're not. And it's okay to make that kind of like connection. It's like, oh shit, I keep like praying for abundance. In that moment, I'm constantly just saying I'm scarce, I'm scarce, I'm scarce, I'm scarce. When you put on the identity of it first, and then the demonstration in the physical will just be orchestrated by infinite intelligence, and it'll be brought to you so you can physically express it in form, and you can test that over and over again, but like but the easiest way to do it is when you're sitting there, oh, I desire to be this. Well, you're automatically saying that you're not, which automatically should be a sign that, oh, I'm in my old identity of separateness again. And it's that quick realization. Then you can ask God to help you, or you can just put on abundance instead. Or if you don't know what that even looks like, then you can ask like the Holy Spirit to teach you what abundance even means, because it's beyond just cash. It's beyond that, it's like It's abundance of friends, abundance of time to do things with your family, abundant, when you really see scarcity in action, it's this constant seeking, it's this constant just not enoughness. It's like, oh, I just got this, but I'm like thinking about getting an upgrade already. It's constantly just not enoughness. It's this constant just rat race mentality, the wheel of just I need, 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 and it becomes so draining at times, if you're in that, or you're getting that expressed back to you through others, which is ultimately just showing that going on in yourself. It's a big mirror. So it's easier then to make the mental shift in consciousness to go, oh, and a lot of times there's like maybe a fear barrier that's keeping you locked in a current state. you know Maybe you're comfortable at like I don't know, 30 grand a year or something like that. That's your fear barrier. Anything more than that, now all of a sudden there's a bunch of resistance and a whole bunch of shit going on. But like realize that that's all your rules that you're making. Like you're making that little rule up. If you look out into creation, there's people that are sky's the limit on abundance, and God gave them that abundance. And God's not a respecter of persons. So if God gave it to them, God will give it to you too. You just got to start changing that inner story, that inner identity, that inner self concept from the old you. That this is not actually even who you are. It's kind of like an illusion. To the new you in Christ, and and start demonstrating more and more so of that. And so, I just wanted to bring that to you guys' awareness, your attention. Start, putting that on today. It's only ever now, so it's like, when are you going to do these things? Now. And so, with that being said, I appreciate you guys liking, sharing, subscribing, all the social networking things. I also appreciate your spiritual support and your financial support. Thank you for that. And until the next now, God bless.